welcome everybody to the third webinar, as I said, dedicated to methodologies and best practices for your business process automation project with Bonita. I'm pleased to talk to you again after the two first chapters. And today, in this third part of our series, I am going to give you the keys for a successful collaboration in the construction phase of the foundations of your first process-based application within the Bonita development suite, and especially thanks to the studio. All what I'm going to tell you about is based on the design of our product and the way we developed it, but also on a large number of comments from our users and customers who were very kind and shared with us their way of working with our product and their comments. Before we start, let me remind you that you can ask your questions in the question box of your configuration panel in GoToWebinar. Feel free to ask them. If I can, I will try to answer during the webinar. And if not, we still have a more or less 15-minute session for questions and answer at the end of the webinar. So now I'm going to shut down the camera and start. So before we start, I just wanted to go back a bit to the life cycle of the project, because we already talked about that during the two first webinars, but I just wanted to remind you about that, and especially for the people who could not attend the two first chapters. So remember, the BPM have what we call a BPM project life cycle. So the digital process automation cycle is made of 5 phases, and is based on the continuous improvement cycle. So during our first chapters, we saw discovery and design phase in the first chapter, and the way people are going to think about what they need to optimize. Then we talked about project methodology to launch the implementation phase. And we saw that it's important to have an iterative and agile methodology where you are going to build the smallest possible value, what we call the happy process, the happy path process, and iterate to add values as long as you implement the application and you build it. So today we are still in the implementation phase, and this third chapter is focused on how to build the application with Bonita by promoting collaboration as much as possible. We had seen in the previous chapters as well that collaborating between business users and IT team is mandatory, is really important if you want to success. So now we are going to go deeper in the application development, and we start with Bonita Studio. What are we developing? We are developing an application that is based on processes. That's the basis. And if you work with Bonita, it's because you are going to develop an application based on processes. They can be structured or unstructured, but you still have processes. What does that mean? An application means user interface. It means human and machine interaction. So it means that you are going to take into account the way users are working with machine to make sure that it's efficient. Then it is based on processes. What does that mean? It means that every time you are going to develop something, it will have an impact on your business, an impact on the way your organization is done, an impact on the work, day-to-day work of everybody. Because most of the time you are going to change the core business processes. And even if you change a small process, it has impact on the human. So we can see that for a successful implementation, collaboration between the business users or their representatives and the IT team should be encouraged as much as possible. And that's something we are going to see through the studio. Everything will take place first in the studio. So before going into details, I suggest that we do a quick review of what is the studio, especially for those who still don't know it very well. Here is the studio welcome page. As you can see, I have the studio welcome page for enterprise because I am going to show you examples and demos based on enterprise edition, but I will also tell you what you can do with the community edition. So Bonita Studio is part of the Bonita development suite, which also includes the UI designer to create user interfaces. It is an Eclipse-based desktop application that provides all the tools you will need to model, develop, and compile a process-based application. So it will provide capacities to model processes, as you can see here, to design the user interface, to define your business data model, but also to design the living application and define actors. Also, it will allow collaboration at project level with Git. This is an enterprise a feature, but if you use Bonita Enterprise, we really advise you to share your sources, the sources of your project through Git. So, okay, we see that you can do lots of things with Bonita Studio and build the core structure of your application and integrate it and model all your process. That's good, but who will be interested in working on this application? There is a whole team. You have the whole IS team. The project team can be composed of the project manager, an architect. You can have database engineer. You can have developers, different types of developers, front end, back end, and so on. And sometimes you can also have a representative of users, such as what we call people that are more functional than technical. That's good. And today we are going to retain two main roles, two main types of profiles working on this project. Who are they? We are going to talk about Cindy and Dave. But you will tell me, but what's that? Okay, remember, we rewind a bit until the first chapter of our series, where I was talking about persona. And I had told you that it was interesting to rely on personas, which are common profiles for a certain type of people with their competencies, their skills, with their what they like, what they dislike, and the role they could have in an organization. So it's interesting to rely on those personas to know how to address the different actors in a project, in a BPM project. And that's also what we do when we build our product at Bonita. We think about the people that are going to work with our product on their project. And among all those personas, we chose to focus on two of them. So the first one is Dave, our backend or full stack developer, and that's one common one. You know him, or maybe you are Dave, because you are developing applications. You are working with Bonita Studio. But we also have Cindy, who we call a citizen developer. Well, she could be a business analyst, for example. She could be a business expert, a user representative that is working in the project team. It could be a project manager. But the fact is that this person is interested in IT as well as its business, her business, and she's going to maybe try things on our side. And we want to avoid shadow IT. And the fact is that for us, shadow IT is the worst thing you can have in a project. Because if you have your IT team working on the application implementation, and on the other side, a user is working on his side on something else, you will not be successful, and you have the risk to discredit your IT team. So the goal is really, and above all, to make sure those users will be able to participate in the design phase and also the build phase through the studio, while we allow the IT team to maintain the governance of the application and make sure both collaborate. So we need to use both as expertise and remember the strengths of each profile, their value, to make them work together. So what's Dave's strength? It creates the logical backend and the core, what we call the computational logic of a website, a software, or an information system. So he's going to create it. Cindy, on our side, is going to manage resources, so the project brings the maximum of benefit. Or she can be a key user, as I said, involved in the project. What is important to remember is that Dave does not want to manipulate business objects. He wants to code. Even if he's interested in the expected result of the application, of course, and because his job will be reflected in the use of this application. He doesn't want to deal with the business side of it. Whereas Cindy, she has all the business knowledge, and she's also interested to be involved in the business aspects of the project, and she also likes to see what's going on the project. Now, I will go into details about the use of different elements of the studio, demonstrating with Bonita for each of the elements we are going to build, how Dave and Cindy can interact to create the application. To do this, and even if Bonita is what we call a DPA, Digital Process Automation System, which means that it deals with critical processes, here I will take a fairly simple example of vacation request management, just for its educational value, essentially. Because with a solution like Bonita, we can also manage requests, and I just want you to simply visualize how Cindy and Dave collaborate on every aspect of the project. So don't be surprised. We try to be as simple as possible to make you understand everything. So let's start with the beginning. How can they collaborate on process design? First of all, and for me, that's really one important thing to know and to keep in mind before you start. They have to speak the same language. A very good way to do that is to train both of them to BPMN, because BPMN is a standard notation, so it will help them understand exactly what they want. So Cindy can tell Dave what she wants. Dave understands exactly what is going on. Moreover, Dave and Cindy, if I could, should work closely together side by side. We talk about peer programming. I would say peer designing would be good as well. Because if they work on the same screen, side by side, they can discuss. It's easier. And it will save Cindy from entering Git and all those technical details that could confuse her. However, I know that, and I know because some customers do it. It is also possible that Cindy enriched, in particular, the initial process diagram, for example, on her part, and then use Git and push it to Git to propose her modifications to the development team. That's also possible. So if we talk about process design, that's what I was saying. Cindy has the knowledge of the process and the path of the process. So she will help Dave with details. And to make it easier to understand, she can use colors and annotations. Dave on his side is going to work with Cindy to design the process and then optimize it and make it executable. So let's go to Bonita to see how it can work. Just for you to know, and I will just show it quickly, if you are on Enterprise Edition, you can clone here your project from Git directly using the Git, for example, GitHub URL. It will import directly all the project with all the artifacts. It's simple, and then you can use the Git tool integrated in Bonita to do the staging, to do the pull request, and also to commit and so on. If I go here in my project, because I already imported a project, I will go to the diagram. You see that we have already designed tasks of the process. But for example, Cindy would like to inform Dave that the process has to be initiated through a form. So she can annotate here form for new for new vacation request is used to instantiate the process. Hop. Here we have a first comment. Then, for example, she could tell Dave that maybe some tasks can be automated. So for example, this one, they deduct requested days from available days. It can be static, but it can also be automated. She could use a color code, for example, in order to say, okay, I want it to be automated. So red, like that, here. And this one as well, the calendar. She wants the calendar to be updated automatically. She doesn't know if it's possible, but she asked for it. So thanks to this kind of colors, she can give more details about what could be done or not. If we talk about the business data model definition, that's a very important step because it's the base of the data structure, and a process by definition will transfer and exchange data. So Cindy's role is really important at this stage. She can create the data model, the structure of the data model. But Dave is going to handle all the aspects related to the database. For example, if the behavior of the database is lazy or eager, or for example, it can define the constraints, custom queries, and so on. Also, Cindy can use the BDM access control feature to define who can access which type of data, and that is something she can do on her own. Then she will indicate Dave in each task of the process where the data should be updated. For example, in a task, she can add a comment and say, okay, we need to update the number of days. That's the basis of the contract we are going to see afterwards. So if I go back here and I want to define my data model, I will go to business data model. So that's something available in both community and enterprise edition. You can see here in my package that I have already defined 2 objects that can be defined by Cindy easily. She can give all the attributes, for example, the start date, that is mandatory, the comments that are not mandatory, extra. But the constraints, for example, or the queries, default one that are fine by most of the time, or the custom one that can be different. They are defined by Dave because you need to know how to write queries. Sorry. Then, if I want to restrict the access of the data, I will go here, right-click, New, BDM Access Control, and I will define as Cindy in the editor the rules, so I can define limited access days. The access to available vacation days is restricted. As you can see, I am Cindy to the requester. I am Cindy and I want to make sure that only the requester is going to see the attribute of the number of days. So it's not here. Sorry, it's the vacation available, but up. I chose the wrong object. Up, description, limit. Days available counter is only visible to the user. Here I am. When we have defined the business data model, we are going to work on the contract. The contract is going to link the data with the form. So the contract is going to define the rules for the data availability and update. It's technical, so it will be managed by Dave, working from the annotations from Cindy. So Cindy is going to annotate the rules and the conditions that will form the contract, and Dave is going to create it to write the expressions in Groovy and manage the operations to update the data. You have to remember, for example, if you have contract restriction, that there are technical restrictions. For example, if you want to have a field mandatory in the form, you will specify it as a restriction in the contract. That's done to avoid sending the form if the conditions are not met. You won't be able to send the form until all the conditions of the contract have been met. This is not including user interface restrictions, such as, for example, my field name. I don't want it to take more than 50 characters. This will be processed directly in the UI designer. There are 2 types of restrictions, and you don't have to mix both of them. If I go back to the contract, then let me go back to up here to my task. For example, I go to execution. No, not this task. I will go to review. It will be better. I go to the execution and I can see that I had, when we start the task, the contract, where we are going to add rules from data, the status of the contract, comments of the contract. Cindy here can annotate and give description, but all the constraints here, for example, you need to leave a comment if the request is refused, is something technical. So it will be done by Dave. If I go further, we now have to define the business rules. That's something that happens quite often. You have business rules. You need to know and to take decisions. And if a condition is okay, is right, then you are going to take a path. If it's not, you are going to take another path. It happens very often in the processes. So Cindy is going to define them in a simple language, BPMN again, and they will be translated by Bonita Studio. For example, the business rules can be represented by gateways. So Cindy will model the gateway with the conditions in annotation, and Dave will define the technical conditions in the transitions itself. It's done using Groovy, so you need good knowledge. That's why it's rather Dave who has those skills that can do that. But sometimes Cindy could participate. It can happen. In particular, if she is following the documentation where we offer several examples of Groovy script. So that can be a way as well to involve Cindy a bit more in the product. Moreover, this business rule can come also from a BRMS, a business rules management system. Then Dave will connect to this BRMS to take into account the rules in the task. So let me show you how it works in Bonita. Here you can see a gateway. This is an inclusive gateway. So we are going to have to take a choice. Is the request approved? So Cindy will put the gateway. She will put the question to make sure Dave understands what's behind that. And if there are two conditions, the first one will be no, for example, and yes, she will put everything in annotation. But then in the transition, Dave is going to define the default flow here as no. And in the transition of yes, she's going to use an expression in Groovy expression, as you can see here, to say that it's approved. So here we have talked about business rules, but there is another way as well to define rules and to define, to talk about business rules. And that's done through the parameters. Cindy is going to define and enhance the business parameters. Those values are business value that can change, but that won't change that often. For example, you can talk about legal values. If we talk about vacation, I don't know how it works in your countries, but in France, for example, you have two types of vacation. You have kind of paid vacation, official paid vacation, and what we call RTT, that are vacation, additional vacation due to the working time you have. And this value can change depending on the law and depending on the company. So for example, you could change this value as a parameter. Then dev will define the values of the technical parameters, such as the SMTP server, things like that, or the calendar configuration, for example. What is interesting if you use Bonita Enterprise Edition is that the parameter will be available for live updates when you are in production, which means that you are going to be able to update it live through Bonita portal without being obliged to release a new version of the process to modify it. In Community Edition, you will have to release a new version of the process. Let's go to the portal. To the studio, and let's have a look at the parameters. We are going to the configuration panel. And as you can see here, you have the parameters. For the time being, we just have technical parameters, but I could add a new parameter. To do so, I am going to go to the pool here. And in data, search for parameters, add paid vacation, for example, number. It's an integer. And now that my parameter is defined, I can give it a value. I will go back to my configuration panel. And I will add, for example, in France, we have 25 vacation days. We are lucky. And I will add it here. This value will be integrated in the process and will be used as a business parameter. So now you know everything on the business rules, parameters, on the data model, on the processes. That's good, but the application should be integrated with other systems in order to work and automate efficiently. So now we are going to see how Cindy and Dave are collaborating on the connectivity and integration. You are going to tell me, well, that's something really technical. Only Dave can work on that. Connectors, API. Well, Cindy has his part to this job. She can indicate which tasks require integration. For example, if we need to send an email to alert someone, if we need to retrieve information from an external database, she can give this information to Dave thanks to the annotations. And Dave will add and develop connectors or REST API extensions, for example. Let me show you. Here, I have added annotations to say, okay, an email notification of approval needs to be sent to the employee. And as you can see, Dave has changed the type of task to service. So it's a service task. And he has added a connector. We are going to see the connector here is an email connector. And if I show you, you will see that you got all the configuration and all the information. Yes, she will enjoy. We could have done that as well with the calendar, as she had requested it to be automated, and add, as you can see here, a connector to register a new event in the calendar. This is done thanks to connectors. And if you want to see the connectors, you go to Development, New Definition. And here you can see the list of connectors available. As an example. Then, if we go on, we still have something to prepare before going to the user interface. Is the organization, because we need to know who is going to work on which task. And to do so, we need to count with Cindy, because she knows very well the people and their roles in the organization. So she can help Dave define the actors on the process and map the organization with those actors. She can also model the lanes directly, because it's easy. You just have to drag and drop the lane into the process. Then Dave will develop the actor filters, because that's something technical. For those who don't know what is an actor filter, it's a script, a filter to address a limited a subgroup of users related to conditions. So for example, you have a group of users and you have people on vacation, you will automatically delegate their tasks to other people. And to do so, you can use the user filter, the actor filter. Then you can also configure the adapt synchronizer, but this will be done on the server out of the studio. If we go back to the organization and actors, if you remember, the organization is defined here in the studio with a fake organization, which will give you all the groups, the subgroups, the membership, and the roles, and also give you all the information of the users. Then you are going to map them to actors. So you are going to define, for example, lanes, and say, if I go here in the manager lane, I want my manager to perform the action. So if I go to actors, I'm going to say that the actor is defined in the lane, but I will set an actor filter to say that we need to have a link between the employee and the manager. If Cindy wants to do it, she can add a lane as well. Up here, maybe we can up. We will name it manager backup. Up. And if I see that the manager has not reviewed the request within 72 hours, for example, and in spite of the reminder here, I will put an action with an event to say that this person, the manager backup, is going to review the request. Hop. So we are now ready, because we have our process, our data, the organization, everything. We are ready to go to the user interface if needed. To collaborate on the user interface, Cindy is going to initialize the pages in the UI designer or adjust the forms created from the contract. And to do so, we advise again to work together side by side to do mock-up of the pages together using UI designer or even another tool, another mock-up tool. And then Dave is going to optimize the pages and forms to make sure that they are going to be performant and also to make sure they will be linked correctly together to develop the application. It will also develop custom widgets in the UI designer and if needed, but that's only in Enterprise Edition, the REST API extensions. Examples of optimization fragments, for example, if you are in Enterprise Edition, which will help you reuse parts of the form or the page, or in Community Edition, CSS to optimize the page spacing. Cindy can also handle the translation because Bonita manages internationalization. Sorry. You have to know that sometimes, because I know that people would prefer to do so, sometimes you can start with the user interface and then manage the contracts from the defined screens. That's possible. But in this way, nothing will be automated, which means that you won't be able to create the forms from the contract with the correct widgets and the correct constraints. You will have to do everything manually. I won't show you the user interface today because it's the subject of our next chapter, next webinar, where I am going to tell you about best practices for the web development and also for the platform tuning. So we can go directly to the application descriptor. What is the application descriptor? Now that we have defined all the pages, all the forms that are being part of the user interface, we are going to return in the studio and with the application descriptor, finish the structure of the application. So Dave is going to create the application descriptor, but Cindy can use it to test the application. Why? Because she can visualize everything and change the structure, for example. She can add menus and so on. Dave will also work on the look and feel, the layout and the theme of the application to make sure everything is, for example, compliant with the company chart. I will show you how it works. If we go to the application descriptor that has been created by Dave, and I go to application data, you have seen that it's retrieving all the Bonita default pages, and it's also retrieving the application page, example vacation management, that has been created in the UI designer. If I would like, I could have a menu, my menu, so vacation, application. And in this menu, I can have a home page. I have it, my home page, it's index. And I can have, for example, a vacation request page. Here, I will use the example vacation management, the custom page, and the token will be defined by Dave because it needs to be related to the page XML. So for example, I think it's example. Hop. Here we can change the layout and have a custom layout or the theme. In Community Edition, you will have the descriptor as well, but you will see it directly as XML. So you can build the structure of the application, but it won't be so user-friendly. So it's not easy for Cindy to collaborate with Dave working on an XML file. So we have done, well, the overview of what can be done to collaborate in the studio, but now what could be done to go further in this collaboration? In 7.10 in UI Designer, we have integrated a new feature that will be available as a video next week. It's the fact that we added a BDM menu in UI Designer to manage directly all the business data model in UI Designer thanks to a wizard. In 7.11, we plan to offer a feature to generate a complete documentation from the .boss file, including all the artifacts, to make it easy to read and to change. So that you know, the documentation generation will be available in the beta test for the community users who request it. We are going to build and publish a dedicated page on the community website to register if you are interested. So feel free to pay attention to the community website because we really need your collaboration. We are talking about collaboration today, so we also like to collaborate with our users to make sure that we develop the right features, and we know that this feature is important to make sure that the project team can work together. In addition, if you want to ensure effective collaboration, it's important to continue this collaboration after production in the process optimization. That's one of the points I am going to address in the last chapter of the series that will be dedicated to post-production. And as a conclusion, I just wanted to, add this sentence just to say that agile and iterative methodology and side-by-side work and communication are key to the success of the project with Bonita. We are not talking about tools, and even if I show you everything in a tool, humans are going to work together to make it successful, and that's the most important. Thank you for your attention. Now it's time for questions. I don't know if you remember, but you can ask your questions in the chat box and the question box of your configuration panel, and I will be happy to answer. Oh, okay. I have a question here. Please provide the links to access the recordings of the webinars. Yes, of course. You can access those webinars on YouTube on our channel. Let me show you. If I go to YouTube in the Bonitasoft channel, you can go to playlist, and you can see that here you have a playlist called Best Practices, where you can see other chapters. So for the timing, you have chapter 1, chapter 2, and after this session, the recording will be available pretty quickly, and we will add the last 2 chapters afterwards. Another question? Okay, can you show the Git feature and import a project? Yes, of course. Okay, I have here GitHub because I'm working on other projects. So let me check which project could be used. Actually, I think the one I had was good. Yeah, I will use it. The Bonita case detail is one of the projects made by a community user. So I am going to copy the URL address. Then I go back to Bonita Studio, and I have 2 ways to do it. Or I can go to team, git clone, okay? Or I can go back to the welcome page and clone the project from Git. You can see that as I have copied the URL before, it's automatically pasted here. So I do next. I have the project name, so it will be a different project. This is only available in Enterprise for two reasons. First of all, we don't have the Git functionality, but more than that, we also can't use multiple projects in community, whereas in Enterprise, you can have different projects. So I click on Finish. Oh, why it failed? Strange. Uh, no version found. Oh, it might be an issue in the project itself. So I will change. I know, for example, I don't know. I have here an example that is available. It's an official example. So I will clone it. I go back to the studio. I copy it. So you have seen that it has changed the link, and I do next. Finish. So it's cloning all my projects, and it will show it directly in the studio as a new project. I will let it finish. I don't know if you have other questions, if everything is clear or not. While we are downloaded the new project, just for you to know that the next chapter will be on March the 10th. It will be about web dev methodology and best practices for the platform configuration. I hope you will attend it and follow it because it's interesting. We are going to go deeper into other components of Bonita. And the last one will be in April, and it will be about post-production, what happens when you are in production. So here, as you can see, I'm back to the studio. And you see my project here. And if I want to see it, I can see it. So Git staging, up, and you have the same interface. You can commit, you can do changes, etc. Okay, I see there are no other questions, so I would like to thank you everybody for attending this session. For example, if you want to help us with the development of this initiative, of the collaboration and work between business people and technical people, please feel free to contact our product owner, Nathalie Cote, natalie.cote@bonitasoft.com. She will be happy to hear from you and to listen to what you have to say and to help us improve the product. I hope you liked this webinar. You will see that at the end of the webinar, you will receive a quick survey to know about your opinion, to have your opinion about this webinar. Feel free to feel it. It's always interesting for me to know what you think and to make sure I can improve myself as well. We are in a continuous improvement loop. And also, if you have ideas of new webinars you would like to see, add them, add your ideas, because then we will create new webinars on totally other subjects. Thank you, everybody, and I wish you a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.